In a sudden, sweeping move, the United States government has placed massive restrictions on Anthropic's absolute top-tier AI models. Whether you're a developer, an enterprise user, or just trying to keep up with the future of artificial intelligence, this shifts the entire global landscape. We are breaking down exactly what happened, why it happened, and what this means for our global access to frontier AI technology.
Okay, let's dive into this, starting with the sheer scale of the fallout. Hundreds of millions. Let that sink in. That is the staggering number of users worldwide who were suddenly impacted when Anthropic was forced to disable customer access to its most capable systems. This isn't just some quiet regulatory tweak happening in the background. This is a massive recall of a commercial model that had already been deployed to a huge international audience. So how exactly did an AI tool used by hundreds of millions of people get abruptly pulled offline?
Part 1. The Foreign National Ban.
The immediate impacts of the Commerce Department's directive are incredibly sweeping. First off, Anthropic had to suspend all customer access to both the Mythos 5 and Fable 5 models. But the directive actually goes much further than just the public. The U.S. government ordered Anthropic to suspend all use by foreign nationals. This means that even many foreign nationals working directly inside Anthropic are legally restricted from touching these models. And finally, moving forward, the directive requires Anthropic to get an export license from the Commerce Department for any export, re-export, or domestic transfer of these specific models. Impartially speaking, this stands as one of the furthest-reaching actions any government has ever taken against an advanced AI model.
So what actually triggered this massive response? Well, the source material uses a very specific word here: spooked. Anthropic's newest model, Mythos, literally spooked the US government and Wall Street with its raw capabilities. Experts say this model can exploit cybersecurity vulnerabilities at an absolutely unprecedented pace. Because it was seen as so extraordinarily capable, Anthropic originally limited its release solely to a group of key partners, doing so specifically to secure the world's most critical software. It was only last week that Anthropic released Fable 5, which was designed as a version of Mythos deemed safe for general use.
Moving on to Part 2, the jailbreak justification.
This all centers on a concept we're highly familiar with: jailbreaking, bypassing an AI's internal safety guardrails. While the government didn't provide specific details about their overarching national security concerns, Anthropic believes the US government essentially became aware of a method to jailbreak that newly released Fable 5 model.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the stark, almost night-and-day contrast in how the two sides view the exact same security event. The US government is citing broad national security issues that they believe require an absolute total suspension of the models used by foreign nationals. Anthropic's technical assessment, however, is vastly different. They state that they reviewed a demonstration of this specific jailbreak technique, and they characterize it merely as identifying a small number of previously known minor vulnerabilities. This is the core conflict right here: a massive national security alarm from the state versus a technical dismissal of minor bugs from the company.
Part 3. Anthropic pushes back.
As you can imagine, Anthropic is noticeably frustrated by this discrepancy, and their official statement makes their technical stance crystal clear. They say, quote, "These vulnerabilities all appear relatively simple, and we have found that other publicly available models are able to discover them as well without requiring a bypass." So Anthropic's argument is essentially that the government's findings highlight an industry-wide baseline and absolutely do not justify extreme, unprecedented lockdown measures against their specific commercial model.
Furthermore, Anthropic points to the proactive steps they'd already taken. First, as we mentioned earlier, they limited the initial Mythos release just to secure critical software. Second, they instituted strict safeguards for these newest models to greatly reduce the likelihood of cybersecurity misuse. In fact, they actually noted that users actively complained that these guardrails were too strict. And third, they worked closely with the US government to red team or deliberately test Fable's safeguards prior to release. They're emphasizing a core industry truth here: no AI model in existence is completely resistant to every single jailbreak attempt.
Part 4. A global AI freeze? So the crucial point is that Anthropic fundamentally disagrees that finding a narrow potential jailbreak should cause the recall of a globally deployed model. And they issued this stark, sobering warning. If this standard was applied across the industry, we believe it would essentially halt all new model deployments for all frontier model providers.
Let's really connect this geopolitical friction to what it means for the international tech landscape. If governments demand an impossible standard of absolute zero vulnerabilities, a standard where any minor jailbreak triggers a total ban on foreign nationals, it could effectively freeze global AI rollouts entirely. Broad application of this super strict national security standard could prevent global users from ever getting their hands on the next generation of frontier AI. The precedent being set right now could literally shape international tech access for years to come.
Part 5. A complicated government relationship.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because the historical whiplash between Anthropic and the Trump administration is truly dizzying. Earlier this year, the Trump administration actually blacklisted Anthropic, declaring them a supply chain risk in military dealings, simply because Anthropic insisted the Pentagon use certain safety guardrails in warfare. In response, Anthropic sued the government over what they called an unlawful designation, and they actually notched an early win. Then, despite the president directing the federal government to stop working with Anthropic, the White House kept in close touch. In fact, Anthropic was deeply involved in helping draft a recent AI executive order. But then, a White House signing ceremony with Anthropic executives was canceled at the absolute last minute. And now the Commerce Department drops this massive foreign national ban. It's a true roller coaster of collaboration and crackdown.
And what came of that executive order they helped draft? Well, it essentially asks companies to voluntarily share new, highly cyber-capable models with the government up to 30 days before providing access to other partners. Interestingly, a source noted that the idea of banning foreign nationals from working on these models had been floated during the early discussions of that very order. It never made it into the final draft back then, but clearly the idea didn't disappear. It just manifested as the sudden Commerce Department directive we're seeing today.
Which leaves us with one critical, lingering question. Will sweeping national security fears ultimately stifle our global access to AI innovation? The line between protecting critical cybersecurity infrastructure and freezing worldwide technological progress is incredibly thin, and right now, Anthropic and the US government are battling right on that edge. It's a situation that will undoubtedly affect developers and users around the entire globe. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.